My wife texted me that she was leaving for France with her lover, abandoning me with our child after draining $120,000 from our joint account. I'd been a stay-at-home dad for 5 years while she quietly prepared legal documents to take custody before disappearing. But when she came back, her face turned ghost white when she discovered every account had been locked, transferred into my name 3 days before she left. My name is Reed. I'm 34. For the last 5 years, I've been the one who stays home. That wasn't a decision I resented. When Belle got promoted to VP at Horizon Communications, we sat down and ran the numbers together. Her salary, $210,000 a year, plus bonus. My freelance design income, $28,000 on a good year. The math wasn't hard. I wrapped up my last full-time contract in March of 2021, right after Nora's second birthday, and from that point on I was the one doing school drop-offs, pediatrician appointments, grocery runs, and dinner. Belle traveled, stayed late, and brought home the income that paid for all of it. I didn't think that made me less. I thought it made us a team. For a while, I believed it did. Since before Nora was born, Belle and I had been putting money into a joint savings account, steady deposits, month after month, for 7 years. By this past spring, we had $130,000 in there. It wasn't a fortune, but it was ours. A future down payment. The beginning of something for Nora. The number you point to when someone asks if your family is going to be okay. Belle managed the finances. She had the corporate background, the spreadsheet instinct, the contacts. I checked the account maybe once a quarter. I trusted her completely. I need you to remember that part, because it matters a great deal to what comes next. There's a finger painting on our kitchen wall. Nora made it on Father's Day, 2 years ago, a tree with rainbow-colored leaves, 1 finger, 1 color. 5 fingers, 5 colors. She signed it at the bottom in crooked capitals. Nora plus Daddy. I taped it up with blue painter's tape that same afternoon, and it had been there every morning since first thing I saw when I came downstairs, last thing I passed before I locked up at night. It was just a painting. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. Proof, maybe, that what we were building here was real. The same afternoon I found the text, I walked back into the kitchen and looked at it for a long time. Nora was watching TV in the other room. The house was quiet. And I thought about the bank app. 4 transfers. 6 weeks. $120,000 moved in careful increments to accounts I had never seen before. Belle had been planning this for months. The only question was how long and who else knew. I put Nora in front of the TV and opened the bank app at the kitchen table. The joint savings account loaded. Balance, $847.12. I sat with that number for a moment. Then I scrolled. Most recent transaction. April 3rd. Wire transfer, $42,000 to something called HCG Partners LLC. I didn't recognize the name. I kept scrolling. October 28th, $32,000, same LLC. November 14th, $28,500, Veltran Consulting Group. December 2nd, $31,200, Ardmore Capital Holdings. 4 transfers. 6 weeks. Every single one landing just below $30,000, the federal threshold that triggers an automatic report to the banking system. She hadn't stumbled into this. Someone had shown her exactly how to move money quietly. The $847 left behind wasn't an oversight. It was just enough to keep the account open, just enough that I wouldn't get a zero balance notification. She had thought about that too. I called her cell. Voicemail on the first ring, phone off, not just ignored. I texted. Double gray ticks, undelivered. I tried Horizon Communications main line. 4 minutes on hold. Then a receptionist told me, very pleasantly, that Miss Hargrove Voss was on an approved leave of absence. I asked when the leave had been filed. She said she couldn't share that information. I thanked her and hung up. In the living room, Nora laughed at something on TV. I looked at the bank app. 4 transfers, 3 shell companies, $120,000 gone, and a leave of absence that someone at that company had already approved. Belle had planned all of this with help. There was one person I knew who had the connections, the composure, and the very specific kind of loyalty that would make her pick up the phone and help her daughter disappear. I found Margaret's number, and I called her. Margaret picked up on the first ring. That alone felt wrong. It was almost 5 in the evening. She should have been surprised. She should have asked what happened. Instead, her voice came through exactly the way it did when she was at her most dangerous, smooth, measured, like someone reading from a script they'd already rehearsed twice. "Read," she said. "I've been expecting your call." I told her Belle's phone was off. I told her $120,000 was missing from our savings account. I told her I needed to know where my wife was. She was quiet for 2 seconds. Then, "Belle has made a very difficult decision, and I think the mature response is to think about what's best for Nora's future rather than causing a scene." I asked directly whether she knew about the money. "That money," she said, "was used to provide stability for your daughter. I would be very careful about the accusations you decide to make. Read. Not a denial. A warning." I asked if she knew where Nora's mother was. She said Belle was settled and safe. I asked if she'd helped plan this. She said, "I think you should speak to a lawyer before you say anything else." Then she ended the call. 11 minutes. She never once asked how Nora was doing. I walked through the house after I hung up. Belle's closet, empty, hangers pushed to one side. Her home office, file drawers open, contents gone. The shared hard drive on the desk wiped. I checked the filing cabinet where we kept our documents. Her passport sleeve was empty. I thought back to the last time I'd seen it at least 3 weeks ago, maybe more. She hadn't packed in a hurry. She had moved things out in stages, quietly, over weeks, while I was doing school drop-offs and making Nora's lunch and checking the savings account once a quarter. The rainbow tree was still on the kitchen wall. Everything else she owned was gone, but that was still there. I still don't know if she forgot it or left it deliberately. I'm not sure which answer would be worse. I called Petra Slate at 9 that night. A college friend had passed me her name 2 years ago with exactly one sentence. "Best family attorney I know, hope you never need her." Petra picked up, let me talk for 4 minutes without interrupting, then asked one question. "Has she filed for custody or divorce yet?" "Good. Send me the bank screenshots tonight. We move in the morning." She laid it out quickly. With Nora in my physical custody and documented evidence of the transfers, we could seek an emergency custody order and a financial restraining order before Belle established legal residency in France. The Hague Convention covered international parental abduction between signatory countries, and France was a signatory. But the window was tight 5 days, maybe less, before Belle's residency status started to complicate everything. I emailed Petra the screenshots at 9:47 p.m. I was still in the same jeans from the parking lot. That night, while Nora slept, I went through everything on my phone. Every text, every voicemail, every saved notification I'd ignored or forgotten. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I found it at 11:30. It was a voicemail, not the one that would matter most that came later. This was a calendar reminder Belle had accidentally forwarded to our shared account 8 months ago and never cleaned up. But when I opened the thread, I saw a name. Dorian Calloway. I knew that name. Belle had introduced us at a Horizon Communications dinner 14 months ago. Tall, easy confidence, firm handshake. Senior Director of International Partnerships. Belle had called him the person who gets things done overseas. We'd talked about nothing for 6 minutes. I'd gone home and thought nothing more of it. I pulled up his LinkedIn. Location, Greater Marseille area. Updated 4 days ago. The same day she sent the text. 14 months ago. While I was shaking this man's hand at a company dinner, Belle was already 6 months into whatever this was. I'd made small talk about nothing while my wife stood next to me, knowing exactly what she was building and exactly where it was going to end. I put the phone down. I didn't throw it. I just put it down. The next morning, a letter arrived by messenger. Cream envelope, law firm return address embossed in the corner. Margaret's attorney. 2 pages, dense and precise. Belle intended to file for joint custody with primary physical placement in France, and given my limited income history and lack of stable employment, any petition for sole custody would be contested vigorously and without reservation. The phrase limited income history was underlined. Margaret hadn't written those words, but she had chosen them. 5 years of raising Nora, running the house, keeping everything moving while Belle built her career, reduced to a legal liability in 2 underlined words. But what stopped me cold was the date at the top of the letter. It was the same morning Belle had sent the text. Margaret's attorney had prepared this before I'd even called her. She had been sitting with it ready, waiting. That was why she picked up on the first ring. That was why she said she'd been expecting my call. I forwarded everything to Petra. Then I went and made Nora breakfast. 2 days later, I was emptying the junk drawer looking for Nora's spare house key when I found a birthday card cream envelope. Margaret's initials embossed in the corner. Same stationery as the legal letter. Addressed to Belle. I opened it. Margaret's handwriting, neat and deliberate. So glad the Marseille deposit came through. Dorian's contact at the agency was exactly right. You deserve this fresh start, my darling. A lipstick kiss at the bottom. Dated 3 months ago. 3 months ago, my mother-in-law was wiring the deposit on the apartment my wife was planning to share with another man. While I was making school lunches. While Nora was painting her rainbow tree. While I was checking the savings account once a quarter and calling it trust. I photographed both sides of the card and put it in a Ziploc bag. Then I called Petra. She listened, asked me 2 questions, and then said quietly, "Reed, this isn't just a custody case anymore. There's a financial crime here, and Margaret is in it up to her neck. I need you to pull every bank statement you have access to going back 8 months. Every single one." I opened my laptop, and that's when I saw how deep it actually went. Petra's paralegal pulled the full bank records the next morning. What I'd seen on the app was just the surface. The complete picture was worse. 4 transfers, each one structured with a precision that wasn't accidental. $32,000 on October 28th. $28,500 on November 14th. $31,2 on December 20th. $42 on April 3rd. Every amount landing below the $30,000 federal reporting threshold except the last one, which had been timed for when the account was already depleted enough that a larger transfer wouldn't trigger the same flags. The destination accounts HCG Partners, LLC, Veltran Consulting Group, Ardmore Capital Holdings were all Delaware shell registrations, opened within the past 8 months, all tracing back through a 2-layer wire chain to a single account in Marseille. The LLC chain had been set up 6 months ago. The same month Dorian relocated to France. Petra's financial forensics contact identified the full structure in under 48 hours. She called me Thursday morning and used a word I had to look up. Structuring. The deliberate breaking up of large transfers to avoid federal reporting requirements. A federal offense on its own, separate from the theft itself. Belle hadn't just taken the money. She had taken it in a way that was itself a crime. I was still sitting with that when Petra called again that afternoon. "Check your voicemail archive," she said. "Anything from Belle in the last 2 months. Go back as far as the app stores." I almost told her there was nothing worth finding. I checked anyway. 6 weeks before the text, Belle had called me from her office. I hadn't picked up. The call went to voicemail and kept recording for 4 minutes after she assumed it had disconnected. She was still in her office. She wasn't alone. I recognized her laugh first. Then her voice, easy and unhurried, like someone who had just finished a good meeting. "He thinks the account is just sitting there." A pause. "He checks it maybe once a quarter." A man's voice low, words I couldn't make out. Then Belle again. "He's just the stay-at-home dad. He's not going to do anything." I listened to it twice. I pressed save. I called Petra. She had it authenticated by a forensic audio specialist within 72 hours. Clean recording. Date confirmed. Voice confirmed. Every word on the record. 6 weeks before she sent the text, my wife had been in her office laughing about how easy this was going to be. The corporate piece came next, and I hadn't even gone looking for it. Petra subpoenaed Belle's employment file as part of the asset discovery. What came back included an internal audit that Horizon Communications' own compliance team had already flagged independently before we'd filed anything. Business class flights to Marseille, billed as client development. A corporate card charge at a Marseille real estate agency. $8,400 across 4 months. Dorian's employee number on the same audit, 3 overlapping expense entries, same travel dates. Her communications general counsel called Petra the following day. The company was cooperating fully. The same company Belle had told me was more important than dinner, more important than weekends, more important than most things. That company was now handing her files to my attorney. 3 days before the hearing, Petra and I sat at her conference table. She laid 5 documents in a row. The text message, the bank records, Margaret's greeting card, the voicemail on a thumb drive beside its printed transcript, the Horizon Com audit. She looked at the row, then at me. "This isn't a messy divorce with some financial complications," she said. "This is a documented conspiracy, coordinated asset dissipation, corporate fraud, and a deliberate attempt to relocate a child without custodial consent." She aligned the edges of the pages. "We walk into room 312 with all of it. Every single page." I nodded. I looked at the 5 documents. 5 receipts for 6 months of planning. Then Petra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and set it face down on the table, the kind of careful, deliberate movement that means the news isn't good. "There's something else," she said. "Margaret's attorney filed something this morning." Margaret's attorney had filed a lease termination notice. The house Nora and I were living in was under a lease Belle had co-signed. Margaret's attorney had contacted our landlord directly, cited Belle's departure as grounds to terminate, and filed a 30-day notice effective immediately. If it held, Nora and I would be out of our home the week after the hearing. Petra filed an injunction within the hour. A lease tied to active custody litigation cannot be terminated unilaterally by one-party standard family court procedure. The injunction would hold, but it had cost us half a day, and when Petra called to confirm, her voice had a quality I hadn't heard from her before. Not panic, the careful steadiness of someone managing multiple fires and making sure none of them reached the same room. "They're trying to destabilize you before tomorrow," she said. "They want you reactive, not prepared. Don't give them that." I asked her directly, "What happens if we lose?" She didn't soften it. "Belle files in French court, establishes residency. The Hague Convention process begins 12 to 18 months, international legal fees, hearings on 2 continents. Nora spends that entire period in Marseille, in an apartment with a man she doesn't know, in a country whose language she doesn't speak. I get scheduled video calls. I get supervised visits if Belle decides to comply, which Petra was not willing to assume. The $120,000, most of it likely unreachable by the time any freeze order lands. And Margaret walks away clean, having orchestrated the whole thing from a careful distance. That was the cost of doing nothing. That was what quiet looked like from the outside. I told Petra I understood. She told me to be at her office by 8 and to get some sleep. I put Nora to bed the same way I always did, same routine, same book, same glass of water on the nightstand. She asked if everything was okay. I told her we were okay. She considered that for a moment, the way 5-year-olds do, running it through whatever internal check they have for when adults aren't telling them the whole truth. Then she looked up at me and said, "Can we keep the rainbow tree?" I don't know exactly what she meant by it. Maybe she'd noticed things gone from the house. Maybe she just liked the painting. But I looked at her face, and then I looked down the hallway toward the kitchen, where that painting was still taped to the wall, the only thing Belle had left behind in the entire house, and something in me went very quiet and very clear at the same time. I thought about Nora at 17, having grown up in Marseille, coming back to visit a father who had decided the fight was too hard. I said, "Yes, we're keeping the rainbow tree." I set my alarm for 6:30. I laid out Nora's clothes for the babysitter. I did not sleep. What I kept thinking about, in the hours before the alarm went off, was that Belle's attorney would be in that room tomorrow. Margaret would be in that room. And they had both spent the last 6 months assuming they knew exactly what I was going to do. They were about to find out they were wrong. Room 312 was smaller than I expected. I don't know what I'd imagined, something proportional, maybe, to everything that had led up to it. What I got was fluorescent lighting, 3 rows of gallery benches, and a monitor on a wheeled stand in the corner showing a video feed from France. Belle was already on the screen when Petra and I walked in. She was wearing a blazer. Hair done. Composed in the careful way people look composed when their attorney has told them to look composed. Clifton Reese, her attorney, downtown firm, good suit, was already at the opposing table. Margaret was in the gallery directly behind him, her own attorney beside her. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Margaret did nothing by accident. The Honorable Diane Carr entered at 9:04. The room stood. The room sat. Petra's folder held 61 pages of exhibits. Reese opened first. He was smooth and well-prepared, and in his own way coherent. Belle was the primary earner. She had driven the family's financial stability for 5 years. The funds in question had been managed by Miss Hargrove Voss in her capacity as the household's principal financial decision-maker. Nora's best interests were served by her mother's resources and stability. And Reed Voss, here Reese paused, just slightly, for effect was, functionally, just the stay-at-home parent. With a freelance income of $28,000 in the prior year and no stable employment history to speak of, he submitted a single-page income summary. My name at the top. 1 number at the bottom. Belle on the monitor was watching him with focused attention. She didn't look at me. Petra stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She moved through the exhibits the way someone moves through a room they've already mapped, knowing exactly where everything is and exactly what order it needs to be seen in. Exhibit A, the text message. Timestamp 2:47 p.m., delivered via airport Wi-Fi. She read it aloud into the record. The courtroom was quiet. Exhibit B, the bank records. 4 transfers, 6 weeks, $120,000 moved through 3 Delaware shell companies to a single account in Marseille. Each transfer structured below the $30,000 federal reporting threshold. Petra cited the relevant federal statute. Judge Carr wrote something down. Exhibit C, Margaret's greeting card. Petra read it into the record. So glad the Marseille deposit came through. Dorian's contact at the agency was exactly right. Dated 3 months before the text. She held it up so the date was visible, then placed it before the judge. In the gallery, Margaret's attorney leaned close to her ear. Exhibit D, the voicemail. Petra pressed play. The room heard Belle's laugh first, light, easy, unbothered. Then her voice. He thinks the account is just sitting there. He checks it maybe once a quarter. A pause. Then, he's just the stay-at-home dad. He's not going to do anything. On the monitor, Belle's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a stillness that hadn't been there a moment before. The kind of stillness that comes when you realize the room has shifted and you are on the wrong side of it. The recording ended. The courtroom stayed quiet for several seconds. Judge Carr wrote something down again. Longer this time. Exhibit E, the Horizon Communications internal audit. $8,400 in fraudulent expense claims across 4 months. Dorian Calloway's employee number on 3 of the same entries. The company's general counsel cooperating fully with the court. Reese requested a brief recess. Judge Carr declined. She reviewed her notes, unhurried, precise. Then she looked up. She denied Belle's custody petition in full. She granted Reed Voss sole physical custody of Nora, with supervised video visitation for Belle, pending further review. She ordered an immediate freeze on all identified marital assets and all accounts connected to Margaret Hargrove's documented financial involvement. She referred the structuring records and the Horizon Communications audit to the Financial Crimes Unit for independent review. Then, she looked at Clifton Reese directly. "Counsel," she said, "the characterization of Mr. Voss as just the stay-at-home parent is noted for the record. So is 5 years of documented primary caregiving, school enrollment records, medical records, teacher testimony. The court finds that characterization to be without evidentiary support." She set down her pen. "The court disagrees with your framing." Reese said nothing. On the monitor, Belle was very still. Margaret's attorney immediately requested a recess. Judge Carr denied it again. "I didn't look at either of them. For a moment, I didn't look at anyone. I just sat there, in that small room with the fluorescent lighting, and thought about a 5-year-old in the other room at home right now, drawing at the kitchen table, waiting for me to come back. I gathered my things and walked out of room 312. I stopped on the way home and picked up Nora's favorite sandwich. Turkey on white, no crusts. It was 11:47 inches the morning. I drove back in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just the road and the kind of quiet that comes after something large has finally stopped moving. Nora was at the kitchen table when I walked in, working on a drawing with great concentration, tongue at the corner of her mouth. She looked up. "Did we keep the rainbow tree?" I looked at the painting on the wall. Blue painter's tape, 5 colors, Nora plus Daddy in crooked capitals at the bottom. "Still there." "Yeah," I said. "We kept it." She considered that, decided it was sufficient, and went back to her drawing. In the weeks that followed, the consequences came in the order Petra had predicted. Margaret's accounts were frozen pending the criminal investigation. Horizon Communications terminated both Belle and Dorian for cause the internal audit had made their position simple. Belle's attorney filed an appeal on the custody ruling. It did not succeed. The asset recovery was partial, 60 to 70 cents on the dollar once the shell company accounts were unwound. Not everything. Enough. Belle called that being just the stay-at-home dad. She said it to Dorian in her office, laughing, 6 weeks before she sent that text. She said it like 5 years of showing up every single day had made me someone who wouldn't know what hit me. She planned the timing perfectly. She moved the money carefully. She even had a lawyer's letter ready before I could dial her mother's number. What she didn't plan for was the junk drawer. The voicemail she forgot to end. The 61 pages sitting in Petra's folder when we walked into room 312. She thought 5 years of being present had made me easy to leave behind. It made me impossible to beat.